All right, let's practice with Flexbox with our Ponder activity. And we're going to go ahead and create two new files in our Ponder, flexbox.html and flexbox.css. And we have all of the HTML we need here in our Ponder code. And it does have the opening and it does have the link to flexbox.css. So make sure you named it the same there. We're going to add a partial amount of CSS. Okay, so right now there are no Flexboxes going on. So we take a look at what this page looks like. We have our links, which are actually going down because they happen to be LIs that have had the bullets taken off. So that's why they're going down right now, which is a good direction to begin with for mobile first, which is what we want to do. Then we have our media cards, one media card by itself, and then a bunch of media cards in a gallery. And they're all just kind of flowing down the page, which looks fine for mobile, but when you've got more space, it looks like they need to spread out a little bit. Okay, so in your assignment this week, you're going to have something very similar to this media card. You'll have a picture and some descriptive text that is going to go underneath it when it's on a small phone, and then to the side of it when it's on a larger device. So you'll notice that this media card that is not in a gallery had the text underneath it to begin with, and then it'll have it to the side. This also has the text underneath here and to the side here, but then it's grouped in a gallery, which is going to allow more per row because we're going to turn on wrap because we have multiple items that will wrap around. All right, so let's take a look. We're actually going to first do the menu, and you can see we don't have it going down in mobile. We could leave it going down in mobile, but especially on larger devices, you do want it to go horizontally, each link. And we've got a little bit of space there, and we do have it kind of coming off to the right of our page. Okay, so let's take a look at that. We've got a URL here that has all the children, each LI that we want to look at. So we can put that into a Flexbox. So let's go ahead and add that. Well, I already have a main nav here, so we can just add to that. Let's go ahead and say display flex and give them a little bit of space. We'll say gap 1em. So gap works a lot like the grid gap does. And if I leave it like that, let's take a look and see what that looks like. That gives us the default of row. And that is kind of what we have here. So we could go ahead and leave that. If you did want to make it a column, okay, you could say flex direction column for the mobile first, and will come down in a column. So either way is fine for mobile first. I'll go ahead and just leave that off for now, since it will look more like our example here. Our links are quite small. They'll fit on a phone okay, but in real life, your links would probably be bigger, and you would probably want to make it a column, and you could use that flex direction to do that. In fact, let's leave that. We'll leave it just so you can see how we could change that in a media query to go back. All right, so you might be thinking, well, I could have done that with text align center or something like that. And it might have looked okay. You could put a little padding around it instead of the gap to give it some spacing. But what usually is happening is when you look at a menu, they don't always align vertically as well. So horizontally, we got it to align just fine, but with the text align right. But if you want it to center inside your header, maybe it's too close to the top or bottom and you want to kind of center in the middle, it's going to be a lot harder. And Flexbox makes that really easy with the align content center. So keep that in mind. Also, it's going to be much more complex when you get on to maybe adding icons or drop downs in your menu. So really is a good idea to use this more fluid, less brittle kind of way of doing this fluid layout with Flexbox. All right, let's go ahead and look at that media box. So this will be a lot like your recipe, your apple crisp recipe that you'll see in your project this week. And we do want it to look like this on mobile first, but we are going to go ahead and set up the Flexbox and just leave it as column, just kind of like we did the the navigation here. So let's go ahead. If we look at what that card looks like, it's called media card container. And then inside there is actually each of the cards. So it's going to have a class of media card. And you can see they're the same down here as well. Class of media card. And it's going to have two children. It's going to have a div with the picture and a div with the title and paragraph. So these two children are going to want to make a column and then a row so that it can go underneath. The text can go underneath on a phone and to the side with a larger device. So we're going to target this dot media card. And we're going to go ahead and put a Flexbox on, make it a Flexbox container by putting display flex. And we do want it to stay. In fact, let me show you what that looks like. Let's put a gap in that one as well so it's got a little room. And it will default to row, right? So even if you're on a phone, it's still going to be row. So we are going to take we want the default to come in, or we want the row to come in on our media query when it gets bigger. But to begin with, I do want it to be flex direction column. Okay. And then when it gets bigger, which let's go ahead and put that media query screen. So when the min width is bigger than 550 pixels, then this code will run. And we're going to go ahead and say media card. Flex direction row. Oh, I forgot to put a dot right here. Let's try that again. There we go. So under 550, the text and paragraph go under the picture. Greater than, it will go to the side because it's going from column to row. All right. We also would like that to happen for our menu. We didn't quite finish that one. So let's do that. Main nav. And we'll go ahead and say flex direction row. Say that, and now we can see that should come into a row as well. Now remember, in our example, it was off to the right. So we could come in here and put justify. So justify is for right, center, left, and align is top, middle, bottom. So we want justify content, flex, and meaning they're going to be at the end of the row. Okay, so now they will kind of be at the end of the screen. Okay, so looking pretty responsive so far. Okay, now let's look at the gallery portion. So right now it's just doing the exact same thing as above. And it is getting that CSS because it has the same class of media card within each one. But we want it to start wrapping at a certain point. So when our screen is really wide, it's going to have kind of a smaller size so that it can start, we can put that flex wrap on it and it will wrap around to each row. So let's go ahead and take a look at the HTML. Here we have a div called gallery. We already have a Flexbox going on in each one of these because we use the class media card. But now we're actually looking at a Flexbox for this entire div with all of those sections in it. So each of these sections is going to be a child of this Flexbox, and the container will be this div, sorry, right here, class gallery. So we're going to do dot gallery. And again, we're going to set it up like a Flexbox as a Flexbox container. And this time, when it starts getting crowded, we want it to wrap. So we're going to say flex wrap. Okay, let's also give it a little bit of space between each, and we're also going to be centering it as well. This time we use center. Okay, now I can take a look, and it's still doing the same thing. We notice that our images are just taking as much space as they want. And so they're really not going to ever wrap. They're always just going to be one per line. So we need to limit how wide each of those cards are in there. So we're going to go ahead and take each item in the gallery and we're going to put kind of an initial size on it. So let's go dot gallery, and then an easy way to say like every element that is a direct child of the gallery, we could put a greater than sign and an asterisk. And we can say, let's use that shortcut. We haven't seen that one yet. This is the one that has flex grow, flex shrink, and the flex basis, or the starting size, in 3 different values. So if we say the default is 0, but if we say 1, it's going to allow it to take extra space if it's got extra space to take. And then shrink 1 also, it will shrink if it needs to. And then we just kind of want the beginning size to be 460 pixels. Now the default would have been 0, 0, which means it wouldn't have grown or shrunk. So we can take a look at that now. And now since we gave it a width of 460, when we have enough room, it's going to go ahead and put those there. And once, if we had a big enough screen or we brought it down to a small enough size, we could see it be able to put even more on the page. See, so we could have more and more per line, but we did want them to be a certain size to begin with. There. All right. So it makes it kind of fluid. You can kind of see a little bit shrinking and growing, and it's kind of using all the space that it has. Now let's try something that maybe you would have thought, well, maybe it's just easier if you went ahead and put each of those media cards and just limit their size. So why couldn't we have just put max width 460 pixels? Wouldn't that have done the same thing? But notice it's really not as fluid anymore. You know, it's just kind of jumps in there. It's not taking advantage of extra space. It's not growing or shrinking. This would be helpful if you wanted to make sure your cards were always the exact set size. But that's usually not the case. You usually want it to be a little more fluid and a little nicer. So that's what makes this Flexbox example nice. It's just really taking more advantage of the space offered, shrinking and growing, and just doing a good job of taking what space that's offered there. All right, let's do a few more things. In our media query, we also want to take a look at the image and content within each of the cards. So we're going to go ahead and put media card image, which was the div that the image is in, and then media card content was the div that the content's in. And we're also going to make sure it's really smooth and fluid as well. And we're going to say that same shortcut, flex. This time we'll leave the default for the grow. We don't want it to grow anymore, but we would like it to shrink if it can. And we'll also give them kind of a beginning size here. We'll do a 250 pixel for the image, and let's go ahead and copy that. And for the content, we're also going to do 0, 1, and then we're going to do 60 characters. We haven't used that unit of measurement very much, but there's characters there. Okay, so let's just take a look. You might not be able to tell too much of a difference, but it is kind of keeping track and maybe making sure that it doesn't get too big or too small and it looks very fluid on our page. All right, so again, these are kind of optional, but it does make it much more flexible and it look really nice on our Flexbox. So there we have quite a few different things. We've been setting up flex containers. We've been making sure they can grow and shrink and have a beginning size with these flex properties here. And my favorite part of Flex is being able to center them horizontally and center them vertically with align content. And it really makes it easy to put a group of similar items together and make sure they're showing up really well on the page. So there we have some examples of Flexbox.